This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
of London and investigates matters of importance to Londoners to that end. The Assembly is composed of 25 members elected at the same time as the Mayor to hold him to account and scrutinise his policies. This is an extraordinary plenary meeting of the Assembly, which means that all members have been invited to attend, and I'm very grateful for those members that are present, as well as our guests who are attending at short notice. Members are also reminded that electronic devices should not be placed in front of microphones, which must be turned on to speak and turned off once finished. Can I now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies for absence today on behalf of the Deputy Chair, Assemblymember Boff, and Assemblymember Cooper, Assemblymember Garrett, Assemblymember McCartney, Assemblymember Mahfouz, Assemblymember Plansky, Assemblymember Roberts and Assemblymember Russell.
Now, under announcements, can I provide an update of some recent Assembly activity since we last met for Mayor's Question Time? The Environment Committee has met to understand the current state of London parks and wrote to the Mayor about managing London trees for a changing climate. The Police and Crime Committee met to question the Deputy Mayor on policing, on the Met's ability to safely store and collect evidence. The committee also wrote to the Met Commissioner calling for greater transparency around the work of its territorial support group. The Economy and Culture and Skills Committee met to understand the challenges prison leavers face when seeking employment. The Housing Committee held a discussion about its report on leaseholds at the House of Lords. The Transport Committee wrote to TfL and to BTP, urging them to allow TfL's emergency response unit vehicles to continue using blue lights in emergencies. The Budget and Performance Committee heard from experts in TfL on the potential funding options for the proposed Bakerloo line extension. The committee also heard from experts on why the costs of building transport infrastructure projects in the UK is much higher than neighbouring countries. The Fire Committee wrote to the new London Fire Commissioner, Jonathan Smith, following a meeting to discuss his priorities for London Fire Brigade. And finally, the Assembly published the 25th anniversary edition of its annual report. I will now move to declarations of interest. Can I ask the Assembly to note the recommendations set out in item 2? And can I ask Assembly members to declare any other disclosable pecuniary interest of any other relevant interest where they relate to items on the agenda for today's meeting? Okay, thank you. We now move to our question and answer session. Join us in the chamber. We have Kaya Kuma Schwartz, Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and attending alongside her is Matt Twist, KPM Assistant Commissioner, Frontline Policing and Metropolitan Police Service. Can I thank you again for attending at short notice? So welcome to this meeting. There will be a lead-off question from me as chair to both of our guests. Assembly members may then put supplementary questions. Please can I ask Assembly member to specify who they would like an answer from when they put their questions. Guests, we would be grateful for succinct answers, please, so that we can get through all the questions that we have for you. And if I can begin with the first question, is I think I want to address this to you, Assistant Commissioner. What's the rationale behind the proposals to reduce the number of frontline police counters and cut opening hours? And in giving that answer, can you also just give the background to the list that you published yesterday? Because I'm not clear which ones are going to be fully opened and which ones are going to be partially opened in the list that was published, as well as some of the financial detail behind that I think all members around this table are struggling to actually find in terms of relating to this proposal.
Okay, well, good morning, Chair and Committee, and thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be here to answer the questions. And thank you also for the opportunity to answer an opening question with some introductory remarks to sort of frame this. So Assembly members will be familiar with the Met's financial situation, and that policing is having to make a series of difficult decisions about how to save money to protect frontline services. So officers are out and about and in our communities preventing and detecting crime. With a £260 million black hole in our budget, it's inevitable that some of the choices we're having to make will change the way we police London and will be unpopular with some people. We are reducing the gap through a mixture of driving as hard as we can at efficiency savings and reducing our headcount by about 1,700 officers and staff. There is no way of doing this that will not be noticed, or its effects not felt somewhere. We can no longer do all of the things we once did in the same way, so we need to make difficult choices and prioritise. This essentially comes down to us having to choose between keeping officers on London streets where they can respond to the public and local communities, or, in the case that we are discussing today, retaining the current position on all front counters, which may be a symbolic point of access, but are largely underutilised, especially overnight. Front counter usage has been in steady decline since 2012, when 12% of all of our reported crime came in via station offices. Since then, crime reporting across front counters has reduced to 5% as people have shifted to use of phones and online means. At some front counters, we see less than 2.5 crimes a day reported. In the busiest, which is Charing Cross, that's 15 crimes, so within a 24-hour period, we're reporting less than 1 crime an hour. The average across all of our front counter estate is 4 crimes per day, reported across 3 shifts, which are often staffed by 2 people. We've made deliberate choices to protect neighbourhood policing, response policing and public protection. Services we know that matter most to Londoners, so we can be there when the public needs us most. This has included growing our neighbourhood teams by over 500 officers and PCSOs over the last 2 years. This year we will move a further circa 500 officers into community crime fighting and town centre teams. Whilst we are shrinking as an organisation overall, we are changing the shape of our organisation to better serve the public and meet the increasing demands for policing at a time when every unit of that demand is getting more complex. Our current proposal is that some of our front counters will need to close. We think about 14 of our 24/7 front counters and 4 of our counters that are only open reduced hours. The remaining front counters will have their opening hours reviewed as part of the detailed design of this process. Now that the staff that are being affected have been told, and we've published a list of those likely affected front counters, and Assembly members, councils, local members of Parliament and other local leaders should all have had the opportunity to be contacted by local Met leaders to discuss this well in advance of today. I hope that has happened. Taking this action will save both £7 million a year in revenue and 3,752 hours of officer police time per month. I'll explain that a little bit. The officer time is required to backfill shifts that can't be resourced by public access officers. So this equates to 469 officer shifts per month, so approximately 5,628 officer shifts per year, which in light of pleas across the board for more visible neighbourhood policing could be better spent on the streets. This is about value for money as well as modernising our services. I do understand the concerns of Assembly members that this might be viewed as a withdrawal of visible policing and presence from our communities. Our intent is the opposite of this. These decisions are about making the Met more accessible and visible in neighbourhoods when the organisation is shrinking. And in order to do so, we need to cut the pie a bit differently to what we have done previously. In this case, my view is we're making a decision to reduce an underused resource whilst maintaining some coverage across London. 20 offices, 20 front counters will remain open, to allow us to continue to strengthen neighbourhood policing teams and focus on getting officers closer to the wards that they police. As I mentioned finally in closing, we will be retaining 20 front counters across London to ensure that there is access, and are working to form the detailed design, which will include what the opening hours of those front counters will be, as well as the staffing levels. And I'll pause there.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I want to be clear that nothing is more important to me and the Mayor than keeping Londoners safe. I am determined to do all I can to support the Commissioner to deliver the new Met for London plan, where London's communities are put first. The Mayor has invested more in the Met than any previous Mayor by a huge margin, bringing City Hall's investment in policing from 19% to 25% of the Met's overall budget. The Mayor's final budget this year included a record £1.6 billion, an annual investment in policing, which is helping to protect neighbourhood policing in London's communities. As outlined in the Mayor's manifesto and his police and crime plan for London, protecting and strengthening neighbourhood policing and London's communities must be the absolute priority. London's safer neighbourhood teams now have an additional 500 officers and staff ranging from superintendents to PCSOs, who are working closer than ever with communities to understand and deal with their local priorities. Working in partnership with government, we are seeing this bearing fruit, with reductions in theft, burglary, knife crime, robbery achieved so far this year, and more shoplifting cases being solved. However, despite the Mayor pulling every lever at his disposal to support the Met, it is also true, after a decade of underfunding worth over £1 billion under previous governments, the Met is facing an extremely difficult financial headwind. Delivering a balanced budget has therefore meant some difficult decisions, which the Commissioner has been very clear about. One of these tough choices the Commissioner has been looking at is the Met's front counters, which is what AC Twist just described. Any change to the number of police front counters or opening times is, of course, ultimately an operational decision for the Met to take based on resources, funding and public demand for services. Throughout the conversations with the Met on tough choices, the Mayor has been clear on the importance of neighbourhood policing, response, public protection, and agreed with the Commissioner that these must be the priority areas to be protected while the Met is making these tough choices. The Mayor and I will continue to work closely with the Met and boost visible neighbourhood policing in our communities, and we will continue discussions with ministers and the Commissioner about the funding the Met needs to make sure everyone in London can continue to be safe. Thank you.
I'm going to now turn to Assembly Member Hall for the opening question.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chairman. Deputy Mayor, why isn't the Mayor here?
Because I'm the Deputy Mayor for Police and Crime.
Yes, I know, we all know that. But since the Mayor is making this decision, why isn't he here?
The Mayor has sent me as his Deputy Mayor for Police and Crime. I think we need to be clear that this is an operational decision that the Metropolitan Police is taking. The Mayor's been unequivocal in his support of the Commissioner in making sure that we're protecting neighbourhood policing, public protection and response in difficult times.
I've heard your statement. So tell me, when was the Mayor actually told this was happening? What was the date that the Mayor was told this was happening?
The Mayor has, as well as all of us, been involved in the conversations about the budget since September last year, when the first workshop on the policing budget was started with my predecessor and his Chief of Staff.
Okay, so
David
he knew
Bennett.
about the front counters closing last September, did he?
No, he knew about the need to look through the...
Yeah, no, we all know that. When was he told that the front counters were closing?
Like all of us, the Commissioner outlined proposals for tough choices in autumn last year, which included a reduction to hours on front counters.
We're all strapped for time. Can you just tell me, when was he actually told, or was he asked, that they were actually closing? Was he consulted, or was he just told that the front counters were closing? Which is it?
He was consulted.
When?
We've had several meetings as we went through.
Okay, give me a rough idea. What month? Because we were all told in isolation in around July. When was the Mayor told? He was in Africa, I believe, at the time. Or was it Brazil? No, I think it was Africa at that particular time. So he was in Africa. and we were told around the 17th or 18th of July. When did he know this was happening?
Similarly, we saw the most developed proposal on this thing in July. We are very unhappy at the way that the information was leaked. We were working through how this was meant to be engaged through by the Met with as it's an operational decision. The Mayor and I have made it clear that we're not happy with how partners were notified about this or unnotified because it was leaked, and we've asked them to make sure that London partners are better notified going forward.
So basically he's known about this for quite some time.
He's known about the proposal, the exact list of the proposal, similarly about the same time as we all knew.
We all knew. He's the Police and Crime Commissioner. That surprises me. So he knew at the same time as we knew. Is that right?
No, we had initial meetings relatively recently, but what I'm saying is...
That's what I'm asking you. There we are. There we are. We've got down to the original question. When was that? Just how long has the Mayor known? Because let me help you with this. He made a promise during the mayoralty that he would have a 24/7 police station in every BCU. He's also always said that he'll keep them open. So exactly when did he know?
So we knew in the tough choices list that the Commissioner outlined in the autumn that front counters were being looked at in terms of reduction of hours. Obviously, we didn't have the budgetary settlement at that stage, and we've been, as discussed in previous police and crime committees, we've been working with the Met alongside them to understand how the additional funding will affect the proposals, and this latest one was going into the design phase, which, as we also discussed
we know
in
this.
private...
You know we're on the clock. Assistant Commissioner, can you help me with this? Do you know exactly when he was told?
So I don't. I mean, I can defer only to what the Deputy Mayor said, in that we knew the budgetary position would be challenging before Christmas. The tough choices have been developed in the period since then. We knew from early on that front counters would be something that we would need to look at. The process of detailed design is ongoing, so the letters that were sent out in July, I believe, are certainly when Assembly members and others will have been told about it. Of course, there's, and I take the Deputy Mayor's point around the sort of consultation and the order of these things. We did have to make a decision on who was engaged when, and whatever we did, there was a risk of others finding out in a disorganised way, and that is what happened. But we have been, as the Deputy Mayor's outlined...
And you all knew we wouldn't be happy. I'm really sorry. I could ask you for hours, but my time is off. Thank you.
Assembly Member Harmad.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, panel. Assistant Commissioner, why is there an in-year crisis in police funding? And why wasn't this identified earlier?
So I think we've recognised the challenging financial position since, as Deputy Mayor mentioned, since before Christmas. The policing settlement we don't find out exactly how much money we have got in the sort of grant until just before Christmas. And following that, there was a lot of work done with MOPAC colleagues to actually work out the details of the budget, and we managed to get some extra money. An additional £32 million was found that we could invest in priorities, which was really helpful. But the reality of it is the financial settlement is such that the gap in the Met's budget is £260 million, which has led to a significant number of tough choices needing to be made, as well as a really hard drive at efficiencies to make sure that everything that we do is as efficient as it can be. But as I said in my opening remarks, with a gap of that size, things cannot remain as they are.
Can you tell us how much these proposals are likely to save, both financially and in terms of officer numbers?
So the model for public access for front counters is that they're staffed by police staff or public access officers. So the total saving that we have for the proposals that we have at the moment is £7 million a year, which will go some way towards the 260. Obviously, there's a lot more still to go. One of the other important factors, and the work that is sort of the work that we've done in designing this, has shown just how many police officers are needing to backfill the current model. So in addition to employing the public access officers due to leave, abstraction, sickness, other things, or where there are gaps in terms of staffing, we've got a huge number of officers per year. I estimated around 5,600 shifts per year, where officers who would otherwise be on response teams or in neighbourhoods are backfilling those front counters. So the modelling that we're doing for this proposal will be to make sure that those front counters are fully staffed by police staff who are specialists in this area and do a fantastic job for us. And we're now into detailed design, and we're now starting the process of consultation with those staff because, of course, whilst at the forefront of my mind is sort of the impact on the public, I also have to really think hard and about the impact on our staff who are doing a good job and doing their best and are finding out about this in a sort of in a way. You know, we wanted to engage our staff first. We didn't want it to be in a disorganised way, but that's how it sort of transpired.
Thank you. Have there been in-year overspends or unachieved savings?
Across the whole board, or just in relation to front counters?
Across the board.
So the budget moves significantly across the year. Overall, the Met's budget is circa £4 billion. There are overspends and underspends depending on different moments in time. I don't have detail of that to sort of give to you today. What we are doing is making sure that the budget is balanced at the start of next year, which is really, really important. There are some areas within frontline policing that I do know about where we are overspending in some areas such as overtime. But there are areas where we're underspending, where we have vacancies that we're holding pending a reduced headcount next year. So those two things balance out at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Let's move on to Assembly Member Garbett.
Morning. I'm going to ask a bit about how the decision was made and identified. So in the current new Met for London plan, so phase 1, you had a target so it said Londoners will be able to easily contact us, whether by phone, digitally or face-to-face. Each borough will have at least one 24/7 counter. By April 2025 was the date. So obviously that was just kind of 3 months ago that date was meant to be met, and now you're planning to drastically reduce them. So I just wondered how that was originally put in the new Met for London 1.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. We wrote the new Met for London plan before we realised the scale of the financial challenge. And it's only at the end of last year that we realised that there would be a £260 million hole in the Met's budget. The new Met for London plan was started a long time before that and agreed. So I totally accept, and it's with regret, one of our commitments in the new Met for London plan was to have a front counter in every London borough. We can no longer afford to do that. And we're making the tough choices to prioritise what we think is most important, which is more officers in neighbourhood policing, working in local communities, in wards, more town centre teams dealing with retail crime.
Yeah, and I appreciate the alternatives that you've looked at, but I really want to understand kind of the frame of making that decision. Obviously, 260 million is quite a big gap to have suddenly identified. So I just wondered how the budget was, when you made the new Met for London 1, how you foresaw what the budget was going to look like over that period. And yeah, I'll ask that question, then I'll ask my next one.
So I don't think we could have foreseen that when 2 years ago, when New Met for London 1 was written, that the scale of the gap was going to be as big as it is at the end of sort of 2024. So New Met for London 1 was sort of end of 22, start of 23. The budget that we're talking about now is for next year, which is April 26. And there's that scale of gap. We couldn't have foreseen that.
So what caused the gap then? So in making the new Net for London 1, where you thought you had this budget, so you made a plan. So I used to do this in the NHS. You make the plan based on the budget that you've got, and then you try and deliver it. But the aim of that was to deliver it a few months ago. So you must have known at the beginning of New Met for London 1, you must have foreseen wanting to deliver it. So it's just how you then identified that. Like, what changed in finding that big gap of funding?
Well, the funding settlement.
So then how have you reviewed everything in the plan? So I know that we've had many conversations about the decision-making around these choices. Have you got a document set out where you've put what you've achieved and what you haven't achieved of the new Met for London 1? Has that gone to MOPAC? Does that go to the London Policing Board? It obviously doesn't come to us at committee, because obviously you've developed the new Met for London Phase 2. So it's... I'd really like to see, you know, this bit's been achieved, this hasn't been achieved, before this new map for London 2.
So, very much so. I mean, one of the things that we're doing right now as we're thinking for new Met for London 2 is going through a process of what has been achieved and what hasn't. And there's been an enormous amount done in terms of turning the organisation around, in terms of our crime performance, in terms of our investment in areas that are most important to Londoners, neighbourhoods, public protection, maintaining response, improving investigations, and the performance dividend from that is starting to come now, where we're seeing 15% reduction or maybe 16% reduction in neighbourhood crime.
But is that set out in a so obviously the new map for London 1's got like the headline of 3 bullet points and then, you know, the date. So is there another document where you've got like an action plan on a spreadsheet where it's rag rated? You know, we've done green here, amber here, red here. Obviously the counters are closed, so that one would be red. Like, does that exist as a document? Because obviously to deliver the new Met for London 2, I'd expect there to be that kind of scrutiny on what has and hasn't been achieved.
I think that's completely fair, and I think that's entirely our intention, is that as we launch new Met for London 2, we will have a review and look at that, each of those points in new Met for London 1 to decide, one, is it unachievable? As in this case, circumstances in terms of our budget have changed very significantly, so we cannot achieve what we promised in new Met for London 1 in relation to front counters. 2, is it something that we think is achievable? So we're going to continue with the effort into new Met for London 2. And then 3, what new? We've achieved such a huge amount, but what else do we want to do for the next 2 years?
But it would have been helpful to have seen that alongside, because obviously you've published new Met for London 2, so it would have been helpful to have seen that, like a proper rag-rated document, so, you know, the red, amber, green document that goes alongside Met for London 2, so people can go, oh, OK, so this bit's been achieved, this hasn't been achieved. Because obviously you've got kind of data at the beginning about crime and other bits and pieces, but what I want to see is phase 1, 80% of what we set out to do was done, 20% wasn't, like a real transparent, because what I worry about is how can we trust that new Met for London 2 and anything it says if 3 months after a target in new Met for London 1, it just gets completely taken away?
So it's a fair challenge. I think it's important to know, and again, we've been working through this now, the vast majority of our commitments in new Met for London 1 have been achieved. What you're saying is, I'd like to see a document that points that out. The new Met for London 2 document's been circulated for consultation, so we want feedback on it before it's sort of formally published. And absolutely, as part of that, I think it's right that we point out where we've achieved everything that we have in terms of our performance, our investment in priority areas, and really turning the organisation around in new Met for London 1. It is important to note that there may be a very small number of things, the front counters being one of them, that we've, due to circumstances, in this case, beyond our control, in terms of budget, that we may not be able to achieve, and we'll be open and honest with that.
I just want to come back on the decision in terms of any qualities impact assessment that has been undertaken regarding this change. Obviously, that's one of the biggest concerns that I'm sure a number of Assembly members share in terms of, I know that you said there's only 5% of the crimes reported through the front desk, but obviously for those people who are reporting, it might be the only way that they can. So I'm thinking of, obviously, people disabled access, people with digital exclusion, but also people who can't report a crime because of a coercive relationship where they may be monitoring their phone, etc. So I'm just, wondering if that equalities impact has been completed and what that showed.
Yeah, so it's ongoing, and I'll just cover 3 sort of core points to this in terms of how did we decide, then what does the demographic show, and then what does the EIA show. So in terms of, there are 3 factors in terms of looking at which front counters will remain open and which we would look to close. The first one is front counter demand, because obviously there's a massive variance between the busier front counters and those that are much quieter, some of whom may see 1 or 2 people in an entire shift. The geographic spread is also important, and that's weighted because obviously inner and outer London have different demands, so we want sort of those that remain open, we want to be spread as equally geographically as possible. And then there's accessibility and operational alignment to things like custody suites and investigative teams, because they tend to drive significant demand and access requirements. In terms of the demographic of people using front counters, just looking at the crime data, and again it varies hugely from, and I'm not going to go into individual examples, but I could do, as to how many crimes are reported per day.
Yeah, I'm aware of the time too.
But sort of 7.8% of our contact in front counters is by people over 65. The gender split's about 50-50. The general population in terms of ethnicity is split broadly in line with sort of London demographics. The equality impact assessment is really important. It's going to build on one that was done sort of some time ago now in 2017 when previously some front counters were closed. And we're undertaking that as with representative groups to understand and evaluate the full impact. I think it's important to know as well, though, that there's impact whatever we do here. So, of course, there are people for whom front counters may be the only point of access, but equally there are people for whom police attending and seeing them in the community is the only point of access. Yeah,
and I think the point is just how are you looking at the impact, and it's good that you're speaking to representative groups and then making sure that they're aware of the different routes of, being able to report crime to, officers. But I'm going to go back to the chair just because of time. Thank you.
Assembly Member Bakari.
Thank you, Chair. The question on when the Mayor knew about these cuts was quite an important question, but it's also important, Deputy Mayor, when you found out about the proposed cuts. We found out about them in July. Did you know about them before the last Police Committee meeting, or did you know about them after the last Police Committee meeting? Because this is why we're having this extraordinary plenary meeting today, because we are worried that you knew about these cuts and closures but didn't want to talk about it in the last Police Committee.
Thank you, Assembly Member Bakari. As I've said previously, we knew not long after I started that there was a list of tough choices, tough decisions that the Commissioner...
We want to know the specific list. We have the list now here. We were notified about the specific closures and front desk closures and cuts in July. Why did you not raise it at the last Police Committee meeting? Why are we having to do this meeting today? The Liberal Democrats have called for an extraordinary plenary meeting because we think you are trying to shy away from the scrutiny that is needed for this particular issue.
Okay, thank you, Assembly Member Bakari. Obviously, as previously mentioned, this is an operational decision and was going through a process. I knew about the possibility of changing front counters' hours in autumn. That continued.
Okay, so you're just reiterating everything else. I want to know, when did you get the email that said, this is going to happen, guys, it's happening, we're going to have to tell everyone that we're going to have cuts, we're going to have closures, we're going to have to announce it, we're going to have to tell people, we're going to have to go to the media? When did you know, when did you get that email? When did it come into your email box and you knew that you had to make a statement about that?
I think I knew around June or July, but what I will say and what I mentioned
So was it before the committee or after the committee?
It was before the committee.
Before the committee. So before the committee, you knew that this was going to happen, but you didn't say anything during that committee meeting. We had an opportunity to discuss this. We could have scrutinised you, we could have questioned you. We could have actually discussed it rather than having a meeting in the middle of August. That is a real missed opportunity, and that's why the Liberal Democrats had to call for this meeting today. And that's really disappointing that you knew and didn't discuss it in the Police Committee meeting.
I understand.
Can you apologise for that? That is something that you missed.
I can explain. I obviously knew, however, as the AC has explained, that this was something that they wanted to engage with their staff on. This was something that they had a particular plan, and as an operational decision, they wanted to work through workforce arrangements on it. We've talked about, obviously, in the conversations that we've had, I raised concerns around engaging with unions,
but you've missed the opportunity to have raised this in a Police Committee hearing and meeting. That we could have had this discussion before in that last Police Committee meeting, I think you are evading questions with the police committee themselves. The fact that we've had to have this plenary meeting today is an indication that you knew about this, you didn't want to talk about it until you had your press statement ready, until you had the Mayor's press statement ready, and you wanted to do it in your own time when we were not going to have a committee meeting during August. So it's a good thing that the chairs agreed to do this and the Liberal Democrats asked for this, because we wouldn't have the opportunity today to have the questions that we need to put across to you.
We have discussed tough choices at several police and crime committees. I have never shied away from scrutiny. I've been in those meetings monthly. I'm always happy to discuss any issue. It's why I've made myself fully available today.
Let's go on to some other questions. And we have got a situation where London needs to feel trust and confidence in the police, and instead we've got broken promises from the Mayor, confusion over this particular statement that's just come out as well, over which stations are going to be open for 24 hours, 7 days a week. I'd like that in writing in the next day. Clarity, because we need to know. For example, we've got a station, for example, Holborn Station. Is it going to be remaining open 24/7 every day? We don't know. We need that clear. So put that in writing to us as an Assembly by tomorrow. I think that is definitely needed. Many Londoners now also feeling that they're worried that the next step was going to be a closure to police stations in its entirety. Will you give a guarantee that no London borough will be left without a police station?
Quite frankly, I can't give that guarantee because we're about to move into the estate strategy. We also know
when is that estate strategy going to be coming out?
We're working
We've
on
asked
it
that
currently.
question many times.
Yes, I know that this is something that the Assembly have had to ask for over 9 years. This is something that we've worked on closely over the last couple of months. The Deputy Commissioner came to a previous Police and Crime Committee, and we're on track to have it published.
So no guarantee that any London borough be left without a police station. No idea when the estate strategy is going to be coming out.
It will be published
London is
the end of
losing
summer.
trust in the Labour Mayor and this Labour government. We've got a situation, for example, in Sutton where they've said they will have a counter that's going to be left open, but the police team will be slashed from 11 to 4, and that's happening in Richmond as well. We've got a situation where the Mayor makes manifesto pledges to increase officers, but over your time as Deputy Mayor, we've seen police numbers expecting to be falling. We've seen the biggest cut to public access to police stations. We've seen a removal of public access points from over half of London's boroughs. And every time you and the Mayor have denied responsibility, claiming that these are operational matters, you don't interfere with them, which begs the question, really, what is the point of having a Deputy Mayor for police and crime if you're not going to intervene on behalf of Londoners when these massive changes are being proposed?
So, as the Commissioner has been clear several times, and the Mayor has been clear, we are unequivocal in our support for the Metropolitan Police. We are working with a Labour government to do all we can to make sure that we make the case for London, that we make sure we have as much money as at our disposal to deliver our priorities for London. That is a priority that has been consulted on.
So the Mayor is only going to intervene really when he's seeking an election, and that's when he'll talk about operational matters. But when it matters, he's going to make cuts.
Sorry, Chair, may I
Sorry,
answer?
do you want to just complete your answer, finish your answer without interruption?
Thank you. The Mayor and I have consulted with London on the priorities in police and crime plan. We've heard strongly from Londoners that their priorities are around high volume crime, neighbourhood crime, building confident communities and safer communities, and that's why we've used every time in our disposal a clear mandate to the Commissioner on protecting neighbourhood policing. We've seen an uplift since the last budget of 935 officers back into neighbourhood policing, and we've seen that bear fruit in terms of knife crime, robbery and theft from person. We're putting the money into places that matters, and we're backing the police and making sure that priorities, regardless in that it's tough financial times, are clear and that they are bearing results for Londoners and keeping Londoners safe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. OK, I'm now going to open up the questions to the rest of the Assembly members. I'm going to begin with Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. My question will be to you, Kaya, but before I come on to that, I just want to reiterate what Susan's already said, I think it's an absolute disgrace that the Mayor himself isn't here to answer these questions. Yeah, he's the PCC for London. The buck really should stop with him, and it's an outrage that he's hiding from accountability. He should be ashamed. But moving on, Deputy Mayor. We know that crime in London is now increasingly out of control. London is lawless. We have knife crime up 50% under this administration, a rate reported every hour, 28% of all UK vehicle thefts here in London, and we now even have foreign governments, including Mexico, warning their tourists about visiting lawless London. Yet the response of this administration seems to be to close half of London's Met Police front desks. And we hear that there isn't the money to keep these open. I contend that simply isn't true. We've heard today, and thank you for clarifying the figure, that this particular item will save an estimated £7 million a year. And yet, in MOPAC's budget, the Met is going to be spending on average over £8 million a year on decarbonising its buildings. So how can you defend that as a sense of priorities when we're closing front desk access for London's public?
Thank you. I think your description of London being lawless is incorrect. We have seen this year significant reductions in key crime areas, including knife crime, including theft from person, including more shoplifting cases being solved from the year before. I've been clear with the Metropolitan Police that high volume crime is a priority, and not only have been clear in that in terms of priority, but we've been clear in that in terms of resourcing.
Over the course of the administration, those figures are up. So could you answer the specific question about this balance of priorities, about spending? We're all talking about this spending item, £7 million to keep these front counters open, over £8 million to decarbonise the building. So are you really saying that the priority should be, let's say, so a resident in, let's say, Chingford, who has to report a crime in Stratford, has to go all that way, OK, in a few years' time the heating bill might be a bit less. But how is that a really sensible question of priorities? We know budgets are tight, we know choices have to be made, but the choice that we should be making on behalf of Londoners is to keep London streets safe. You say that's the #1 priority. Why don't you back that up with actual figures, actual budget?
May I say, Assembly Member Wilson, I know that you already know this, but revenue funding and capital funding are completely distinct funding pots, and therefore such a funding swap of your suggestion wouldn't be possible.
It's all taxpayers' money, it's all London's money, and you can make those choices to make that happen.
I reiterate that capital spending and capital funding is held in the budget in a separate pot. We are obviously working through the estate strategy. We are talking to the Met about how they reasonably meet all the priorities of the Mayor's strategies across that in the most important way to meet those priorities, but within the resources they have to them.
Okay,
but differently, on the revenue spending, we've allocated not only last week 32 million to reduce high volume crimes in London and mitigating the tough
This isn't answering the question. This is pure word salad. Londoners deserve better. This is, we say it's an operational choice, or operational decision, but it's a consequence of political choices. You're spending tens of millions decarbonising the buildings while you're slamming the front door in the face of ordinary Londoners who want to use those buildings for their real purpose, which is to engage with the community and report crime. London is descending into lawlessness. This is your budget, your choice. We've seen what your priorities are. I think Londoners' priorities will be very, very different, and I look forward to taking that on in the elections next year.
Well, somewhere in there was a question. Let's move on to Assembly Member Prince.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and thank you for coming. Could I start with you, Kaya, please? As you quite rightly have said a number of times so far, that local policing, community policing is very important to you, but unfortunately, what we're seeing on the ground in my constituency of Hayring and Redbridge is that, yes, we have more DWOs and more police officers in name, but in reality, they're always being abstracted. And originally, there was the commitment that these officers would not be abstracted, but now they are. So we might have more of them, but in reality, we now have fewer, because they're not there. I went to a meeting only last week, and we had one. The sergeant had been abstracted, the other officer had been abstracted. We're waiting for another officer to be coming. So it's just pure fiction. It's worthy of Jeffrey Archer, really.
Thank you. In terms of abstraction, this is something that we've discussed at Police and Crime Committee, and I know it's a concern. It's a concern that I get raised a lot with me when I'm out and about, and I know that this is one of the reasons that we need to make clear to ministers that funding London is funding a different prospect. We've seen a huge increase in public protests of all kinds in London, and as a capital city, we obviously see and welcome significant celebratory events as well in London. However, that does mean that the demand on policing is different and needs to be funded as differently. I was welcomed the Home Office recognition of that last year through the NIC, but that obviously needs to be continued. It's worth noting, and I'm sure AC Twist will give further detail on this, that abstraction is something that we've discussed and looked at in terms of public order, but it's also important to understand that of the 20% of abstractions that happen, 10% of those are for training, and this is obviously something that the Commissioner has rightly prioritised in terms of making sure that training for new officers, but all officers, is a key part of strengthening the standards within the Metropolitan Police. So whilst I understand it's frustrating, it's also important to get the whole picture. I think it's also important to mention that through the safer neighbourhood work we're doing and the prioritising of town centres, we've actually worked with the police to protect those town centres that we're investing in from abstraction over the next 6 months, so that we can really do a deep dive in cracking those crime areas. But I don't know, AC Twist, if you want to add.
Thank you. I mean, I'm happy to. So one of the things I hear most frequently from when visiting wards and visiting communities is issues around abstraction of ward officers in particular. And Deputy Mayor's already outlined some of the key demand on this, so improving our training to our officers and staff. At the moment, the current training programme is based on our move to...
I'm really sorry, Assistant Commissioner, but I'm on the clock.
Sure,
and,
okay.
The Deputy Mayor gave a very lengthy answer. I've just got 2 points, really. One, as I say, Havering and Redbridge is my patch. I know that Romford will be remaining 24/7. Ilford will not. I don't think that's acceptable. If you look at the hotspots for crime, there's a lot of crime in and around the area of the Ilford police station. It's one of the hotspots, but you're choosing to close the front counter. That really isn't acceptable. And what I don't like is when I was consulted, and I'm grateful to the officer who reached out to consult with me on this, he said it was not a consultation. We're not, because I made a suggestion, he said, oh, it's not a consultation. He didn't do it in a rude way, I hasten to add. It's not a consultation. We're telling you what's happening. And I think it's appalling that you've not had the good grace to actually consult with the Assembly on what would and wouldn't work.
So I'll try and help with that. I mean, I think it's important. Romford is one of the stations that's closing on a daily basis. We report 3.5 crimes at Romford per day, which is 3 people's shifts. So in terms of actually getting the officers and staff where we need them, we want them out and about, responding to everybody in the community.
All right, I'll accept that as an answer. I'm really sorry, but I've run out of time. I'm very sorry.
Moving on to Assembly Member Arani.
Thank you, Chair, and I hope the strength of feeling is felt and recognised, particularly where I represent in Brenton. Harrow is one of the proposed closures of front counter, so people are rightly concerned in the area I represent. Assistant Commissioner, you mentioned in one of your earlier remarks about the interaction that this decision could have on frontline policing. Can you just go into a bit of detail about how it impacts frontline policing?
So I think it's a choice, and again, to draw Harrow out as an example, as it's relevant, less than 3 crimes a day are reported at the front counter in Harrow. There's a choice in terms of trying to meet the budgetary gap. We have to choose where we reduce our services. And I think I've been clear that our priority is to maintain our services in neighbourhood policing, in public protection and in response, which enables us to serve the whole communities of London. And I think it's important to say that I think if we were doing it the other way round, if I was sort of saying I'm going to reduce neighbourhoods or I'm going to reduce investigators, but I'm going to retain a service that is actually where the demand has reduced by over 50% in the last 10 years at similar levels, and I'm going to keep front counters open 24/7, even though in many nobody goes in after hours. You'd be rightly asking me questions as to why I'm doing that, because actually I'm prioritising putting officers in neighbourhood policing teams, in town centre teams, to deal with things like retail crime that we know are so important at the moment. And we're starting to see the benefits of that. So in a shrinking organisation, we are definitely having to change the shape of it in order to focus on the services that London needs most and actually take a really hard look at services that are underutilised. And unfortunately, this is part of that.
Thank you. You've spoken a lot about the figures, the average numbers per day, and also the percentages. Do you have a picture on the types of crime that are being reported at these front counter?
So I don't hear. We absolutely will look at that, and I think it's varied, but I don't have the detail to go into with you here.
So can you commit to an in-depth meeting with Assembly members in the constituencies that are impacted by either closures or reduction in hours, just to go through the detail of the numbers of crimes that are being reported, the types of crimes and the impact on communities? Because I think from our perspective, we do need to see that level of data to go in and scrutinise it better.
So completely, and I think that's something that will be best led locally. So our neighbourhood superintendents or BCU commanders will be well placed to do that with local assembly members to talk about the impact. But to go back to my point, and I think it's understood by everybody, this isn't a case of if we don't do this, the savings have to be made somewhere. So this is in many ways the least worst option. I'm looking at a demand profile that's reduced significantly over the last 10 years as people have moved to either reporting via 101, single online home. We now have things like video appointments available, which are hugely popular, which is sort of victim-led, but people want to contact us in the means they want to. And so looking at the overall financial picture, which is really challenging, where we have to save £260 million, if we can save £7 million of that by reducing a service that the demand for which has reduced significantly over the last decade, then in terms of operational responsibility, that seems like the right thing to do.
Okay, and you've spoken a lot about the percentage of crimes that are reported. It's 5% is the figure that's been quoted publicly. How does that stack up in terms of volume? Has that seen a similar reduction, or is it just percentages because the overall numbers of crime being reported have increased as well?
Yeah, so overall, as we know, that reported crime has increased over the last sort of decade, but the actual proportion of it that is reported in front counters has reduced significantly. And you look at the numbers, and we've done the detail in terms of the variance between some front counters seeing, on average, less 2.5 or 2.4 crimes a day being reported, and yet we're staffing the front counter in some cases 24/7. It's just not an efficient use of a diminishing resource. And I think the point I'd make, because some councillors have asked me as well, well, if we gathered together some money, could we pay to keep the front counter open? And I would say, actually, if I had more money, I wouldn't be investing it in front counters. I'd be investing it in more neighbourhood and ward officers and town centre teams to deal with the issues that the communities, the public, are saying are the priorities, which are things like retail crime, antisocial behaviour, dealing with, theft in the high streets. These are the things that people are saying to me are most important, and I can't deal with that investing more in front counters. I can deal with that investing more in local neighbourhood teams, and that's very much what I want to do.
Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Turrell.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to our guests. I'm also really dissatisfied with the way this is being handled. A month ago, Assembly members around the table only found out about these proposals through the press. That's unacceptable in itself. Secondly, the list that came out yesterday, we've known this since July, and only yesterday have we been given the list of front counters that are being closed. And on this list, it does not break down which are going to remain open 24 hours and which are going to be reduced hours. This is being a complete shambles. And nearly an hour into this meeting, we are yet to hear an apology to this Assembly for the absolute shambles the way this is being conducted. So, Kaya, if I could start with you. With the Mayor last year made a manifesto commitment around front counters, yet now that they're being closed, you're saying it's an operational decision and therefore nothing to do with him. Therefore, was it irresponsible for the Mayor to make that manifesto commitment?
Thank you, Assembly Member Tyrrell. The Mayor's manifesto and police and crime plan are clear about the importance in restoring visible neighbourhood policing and building a safer, more confident communities in London. Any change to the number of front
that was
counters...
a yes or no question. Was it irresponsible to make that manifesto commitment?
I think the Mayor has shown throughout his manifesto a dedication to keeping Londoners safe and making Londoners feel safe. We've seen in other areas of the manifesto pledges around making more opportunities for young children. He's delivered thousands of those, making it
Okay, so the Mayor can't be trusted on his manifesto because he makes irresponsible promises. We've got that. Now, focusing on the actual closures themselves, a lot of where these bases where we're being told they might go down to, where those of us who have had our local police reach out to us, we've been told some of the bases informally that might be might be put on reduced hours. One of those is Bexley Heath in my constituency, which has a thriving nighttime economy. The police base is going to close at 11 p.m. Local clubs and bars don't close until 2:30 a.m. So if I could go to you, Assistant Commissioner Twist, how have you decided where these bases should, and will there be flexibility in the hours to meet the demand of when people go, or will it be a flat, these are opening hours for all bases that are reduced hours?
So thank you. The detailed design as to which stations, which front counters are going to open what hours is ongoing now. So we're not deliberately, whilst we published the list, and the list was published, but individual local leaders were consulted about their particular location in advance of that, of course, but yesterday informed, I apologise, of where the locations were. Yesterday we did publish the list, which sort of brought all of that together. So the detailed design comes down to money again and demand. So for the locations, we're going to look at how busy those stations are and work out the actual opening hours. Because, I mean, you mentioned Bexley Heath, 2.6 crimes a day over the course of a year were reported at the front counter that's currently staffed sort of early, late and nights. So in terms of dealing with the demand, I would prefer to have a more flexible resource working in Bexley town centre or in one of the other town centres in the southeast, able to respond to anything rather than somebody waiting in the small hours of the night for potentially nobody to come in at all. So I think that's really important. But
I'm just going to jumping actually on that point there. So we've spoken a lot about police front counters as somewhere for people to report crimes. We haven't spoke about some of the other uses that a police front counter might have. For example, during the nighttime economy, if someone feels like they're being followed by someone, they're a place for someone to go seek safety. If somebody is being attacked, it's a place for someone to go seek safety. Does the Met Police record how many people coming to their front counters to seek safety?
No.
Thank you. I'm going to close there, Chair.
Assembly Member Desai.
Sorry, got the wrong one. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, panel. My questions are to you, Assistant Commissioner. So what evidence base was used to determine which front counters would be closed or reduced in hours?
Thank you. So three things were looked at, and they're weighted. So this isn't just a sort of a look at demand. So the first one is front counter demand, as in the number of people that come in and report crime, or which is a sort of policing purpose. The other is geographic spread, in that it would not be sensible to have all of the front counters that remain in West London or East London, North or South. And the third was accessibility and operational alignment to things like custody suites, because obviously they generate significant demand with appropriate adults, parents, solicitors coming in and out of the building, which is easier to manage, and also for things like bail to returns. So where people have been bailed from a custody suite, it's easier to reattend one that has a front counter, so we can let them in. So those three things were weighted, and the analysis was done that led to the list of the sort of ones that are going to be closed.
Okay, so just going back to the point of making the station being accessible, and if I can use the example from East London, although I think this is a London-wide point, it applies to other areas as well. So the proposal is to close Dagenham completely and Barking as well, which is a station with a reduced sort of hours opening front counter. So say if you live on the Gascoigne estate in Barking, or even in, say, around Dagenham Heathway, to go up all the way to Romford. I mean, you obviously are familiar with the geography of the area. Wouldn't you consider that to be an issue with accessibility?
So I think it is, but we are maintaining 20 sites across London, and the benefit, the sort of flip side to this, is that we're able to maintain and strengthen our presence in local wards. And what we're looking to do, and it will be feature as part of the estate strategy, I'm sure, but is sort of the success we're having or trying to have with co-location and moving ward teams closer to the wards that they police, and also work ongoing at the moment around how the hours that our neighbourhood teams work, so we can better align that to demand. It's definitely something that we take into account, and that's why one of the factors that we looked at was the geographic spread in terms of accessibility. But as I've said sort of earlier on in the presentation, the priority has to be maintaining our strength in neighbourhood and ward officers, as well as our ability to respond.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm afraid I don't agree with you. Moving on, the list of stations that was circulated by the Met last night notes that 3 of the stations that are going to remain open, Bromley, Sutton, Lewisham, are PF5 stations. Can you explain why this is relevant to the decision?
Because I believe that the staffing of the front counter there comes as part of the PFI service, so we pay for it in a different way to we do on other sites. That's my understanding.
Okay, I find that a bit different, but anyway, there we are. Although I have nothing against the residents of those areas, I just wish that other areas would sort of looked at in a different light. My final question, why wasn't the project of front counter closures brought to the attention of the Assembly during the budget process?
So I don't know the answer to that. I think it was made very clear as soon as we set out tough choices that front counters would be one of the things that we needed to look at, and that's been set out for some time. The budget process, we've already spent some time talking about as to when we knew how big the gap would be, how we would then face into that with tough choices and efficiencies. And the detailed design is now ongoing, and this is an iterative process. We can't suddenly do this overnight. So the first thing is we work out sort of the amount of money that we need to save. We then work out the best fit. And then, as various of your colleagues have sort of pointed out, the disorganised way it came out was partly due to our intention to firstly consult with the staff that were most affected, so we let them know at the same time as local leaders, local senior stakeholders. And then that news got out more quickly than we had hoped after we had consulted our staff, because it is important. We have responsibilities to make sure that our staff are consulted and properly looked after and properly informed. And part of our agreements with trade unions is to make sure that we do exactly that, and we will do that. And then to go out more broadly to speak to local leaders, local councillors, local members of Parliament and others that have an interest in this, such that we can sort of point out the necessity of what we're doing, the operational rationale, which is linked to diminishing demand and our desire to invest and sort of to maintain our strength in neighbourhood policing, and then what the implications locally would be for that.
I think the point has already been made that we only got to know of this in July. I think this whole exercise could have been handled much better. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Deputy Mayor, on the 7th of July, you visited the London Borough of Enfield with the Labour leader of the council, Councillor Ergin Erbil, and you did this lovely TikTok video with him saying, "We want a safer Enfield." At that time, on the 7th of July, did you tell the leader of the council that you were going to be closing the front counter at Edmonton Police Station?
First of all, Assembly Member Georgie, just to be very clear, I don't have a TikTok account. I'm not on TikTok.
There was a video that went out and you were on it. It was his, to be fair.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Fair. I went to Enfield to do a piece about the work that they've been doing very successfully in Enfield on the back of Clear Hold Build. You'll know that Enfield have worked in partnership with retailers, local authorities,
Did you tell
housing.
Councillor Erbil that you would be shutting Edmonton front counter?
No, because it's an operational decision which hasn't been concluded. So why would I tell him something that hasn't been decided? I was there to promote exactly what AC Twist was just talking about, increasing our neighbourhood officers, focusing on town centres and tackling crime and keeping
No, sorry, I
communities
misunderstood because
safer.
I thought you were close colleagues, but okay, you didn't tell him, so that's fine. In Enfield, since 2021, there has been a 30% increase in robbery, a 41% increase in theft, and a 20% increase.
It's not good to talk over each other.
Yeah.
So let's start again, right? We're on the clock.
Yeah.
You just need to be aware of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, in Enfield, since 2021, there's been a 30% increase in robbery, a 41% increase in theft and a 27% increase in possession of weapons, and that's since June 24 to June 25. How much worse do you expect crime in Enfield to get under your watch if Edmonton Police Station front counter is closed?
Thank you, Assembly Member Georgie. I think that this is exactly why in the time I've been in office, I've visited Enfield twice to visit the work that they've been doing, really to tackle some of the entrenched issues that you've talked to and how far they have come through the work that they've been doing through Operation Pisces, through the work that they've been doing with local youth communities to get a huge amount of knives off the street. And I will answer. I don't know if AC Twist has the exact details on that front counter, but I believe that if anything, we'll see a reduction in crime in that area because we have focused, uplifting, dedicated officers in that area.
I don't need AC Twist to tell me that Edmonton front counter is going to close. So therefore, how much
Perhaps
more
you could
will
give
crime...
you and the committee the detail of the level of reporting at that station.
I'm asking you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I'm asking you, and the Chair made very clear that we get to decide who we ask questions to, and I'm asking you, how much worse will crime get in Edmonton, which is in the London Borough of Enfield, if that front counter goes?
I don't think it will. I think that the work that they're doing there, dedicated, has already seen significant reductions in understanding of what's happening there, and we're continuing to invest in neighbourhood policing and strengthening the work we're doing in town centres there. So I reject the hypothesis.
OK, right. Well, we'll try this a different way then, seeing as you don't want to do it the previous ways. If you were a victim of a phone robbery in 4th Street, which is in Edmonton, how far would you need to travel to report the crime under the proposed changes? What is the nearest police station with a functioning front counter?
So the nearest front counter would be Wood Green. However,
incorrect. It's Tottenham, which you're also closing. Tottenham is closer to southern Edmonton, where Edmonton Police Station is, than Wood Green. Wood Green's near me, not Edmonton.
However, what I would say is what's really important, and as AC Twist has marked out before, is only 5% of crimes are currently reported.
Only 5% of crime? That's 50,000 crimes last year.
Across all front counters across London.
Yeah.
The majority of crimes are reported through online and phones. And I think it's a really important point because we need to improve how that's being done. And the work that has been invested in call centres, in things like Met Engage, to make sure that we're communicating with people in the way they want to be communicated with.
You've been to Enfield twice. I would have hoped you were an expert at this point. But, you know, that's fine. Madam Deputy Mayor, do you support the closure of the Edmonton Police Station front counter?
I support overall the work that the Metropolitan Police is doing to set a balanced budget.
Do you support that decision?
And that they having to make sure that they are doing that, as the AC Twist has outlined, in a way that looks at demand, geographical spread, And that's really important to make sure that we have a strong neighbourhood policing offer that keeps everyone, including
so I will
Edmonton,
take it
safe.
you, as the Mayor's Deputy Mayor for Policing, supports the front counter closure at Edmonton and Tottenham. Thank you for confirming. I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Assembly Member Baker.
Thanks, Chair. My questions, well, I'm going to start with AC Twist. I'm going to return to the subject of the equality impact assessment that was touched upon some time ago. So you mentioned that one is going to be produced. Obviously, I think there are very reasonable concerns about sections of Londoners who would prefer or are unable to report crime, particularly digitally, which obviously a lot of other people would be able to, and the impact that it'll have on them. You did give us some numbers in terms of who reports crime at front counters at the moment, but with respect, that's not really the point. The point is who's not going to be able to be in the future. So could you let us know, in terms of the equality impact assessment, how will any results of that be fed into the decision? Because it feels like it's already a fait accompli. So is this going to be a serious review?
Well, it has to be, and we're undertaking the equality impact assessment as part of it. And if we found that there was a particular area or geography that sort of was, had a massive impact that we hadn't otherwise considered, then we would need to look again at it. But the reality also has to be that this isn't, a case of, okay, well, we can keep that open and there's no consequence elsewhere, because the amount of money we have is finite. So if we don't do that, then we might have to make another choice that has an equally detrimental impact on equality. So, but people have spoken to me a lot about, well, what about people that don't have digital and want to come into, or older people who may be less likely to have a digital sort of access, but don't then mention the older people that are immobile and don't want to stray out the house at night and would rather see somebody either on the phone, in person, or on a video call. So it's really important to look at this, and we've got a number of specific groups where we will be inviting feedback. There is already a well-documented EIA from 2017 and the public access strategy that was set out in the Met then. It's dated now, but it forms the basis of where we would sort of start from. And the equality impact assessment will be completed ahead of the formal trade union consultation, which is going on this month. So it's very much work in progress. And that will then form the sort of final decision-making. But if we, for instance, I don't know, give an example of if there was a very strong desire to keep one of the sort of front counters open, that would either mean another one has to close or we have to reduce something somewhere else. And so none of this is without consequence.
No, absolutely, and I do understand that. But I think that the point of doing an equality impact assessment is to look in a lot of detail to say, okay, well, these are the choices we have, and this one is going to disproportionately impact groups who don't have any other options or are going to be really significantly impacted. And with respect, I've looked at the 2017 equality impact assessment, and it doesn't do that. It doesn't say, well, if we do keep this, it's going to have an impact. If we do keep this open, then this is the impact on the same group or something. Because I do appreciate that some people have different requirements, and you need to take all those into account. But can I ask? So, in the 2017 document, which is, as you say, dated, but it does acknowledge that the front counters have a symbolic police presence, and that's really important. And I think it's very important in terms of people who have a higher fear or higher perception of crime in their areas. So that's an impact that I don't think seems to have been considered properly. So what sort of mitigations might come out of that process, of the equality impact process, to counter the sort of people who are likely to be disproportionately impacted?
So I think the symbolic point is right, in that people do attach weight to having a local police station that's accessible. But also the reality of today is that they're significantly underutilised. And so there's the sort of symbology weighed against the practicality and then the budget, which means that leads us to these sort of difficult choices. there are a number of ways that, and also if we think about how times have changed, and we've seen that demand sort of people accessing policing services via the front counters reduced by over 50% in the last 10 years as people, all generations have become more digitally enabled, and we're seeing much more on the phones, on Online 101. We're rolling out things like the video appointments, which are victim sort of directed, which have been hugely popular in terms of levels of satisfaction. So when people select to do this, they find that hugely beneficial to them. So, and also the other thing that I'm really keen to push, and sort of any opportunity that Assembly members get to help with this would be grateful, is looking at being able to co-locate ward teams in local communities where we have local authority buildings, where we have council buildings, where we can put ward teams so they're closer to the wards that they police. And the fact is as well, it's really important to note that and nobody said it, but just to be explicit, because we're closing the front counter doesn't mean that the police station is closing. They are not. So there will still be a policing presence at these locations, albeit it won't be staffed by a 24/7 front counter. And I've seen myself the benefit of actually in Bromley, where there was a neighbourhood base, and we were there. There's no front counter, but something was going on down the street, and we were able to just jump out and sort of walk down and deal with it. And it happened to be a theft in a local supermarket. But that was really a sort of very visceral example as to where sort of having neighbourhood teams proximate to the communities they serve during the hours where they're busiest as well, because that's really important too. Otherwise, the thing becomes really inefficient. Is really important.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I'm not sure. It would be interesting to look at in terms of perception of safety and perception of accessibility of the police, whether a police station which you can't get into is worse or better than not having one at all. Not that I'm suggesting we don't need them at all, but, yes, operationally they're there, that's helpful, but in terms of people feeling that they can get at the police and that are able to feel safe that their issues, their crimes will be able to be dealt with.
So, and just to clarify on that, I mean, any station where there was a front counter that there in future may not be, at the very least there'll be sort of mechanisms by which people, the public, could phone from there. There'll be fixed infrastructure that would allow people to call. We're trialling down in Kidbrooke a video screen which would enable people to sort of dial in live time to the Met Control Centre. That's under evaluation. It has potential, but there's some problems around background noise and light and other things. But the technology is developing. But at the very least, people will be able to make a call from the police station. And then, obviously, in the case of that's urgent, and if there happen to be officers inside, then, of course, the expectation would be they step out and deal with it.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to repeat what I've said in terms of what the actual feeling of the public will be about that. But just finally, are there any specific, in terms of mitigations, are there any specific areas or resources that you will look to put additional resources into as a result of front counters closing or being restricted?
Well, no, I think the choice is very much as to where do we reduce, and in order to enable us to increase the number of officers that we've invested in neighbourhood teams, in town centre teams, and that's absolutely our intent. We're taking these tough choices to enable, whilst the organisation shrinks, us to change the shape of that organisation, to have a greater proportion of our resources in neighbourhood officers, to have we've invested 565 officers and staff into public protection, and we're seeing the dividend of that now as our rape and serious sexual offence detection rate is sort of increased significantly in the last 2 years. And I think it is important to sort of touch on the crime piece, because depending on where you measure crime, of course, it can mean different things, can't it? This compared to the financial year to date, this year we've seen an overall reduction in neighbourhood crime of 16.6%. Personal robbery offences have gone down 12.8% since last year, theft person down by 13%, residential burglary down by 10.5%, vehicle crime reduced by 4.5%. So that's from the same period last year compared to this period this year. So a sense that London is somehow lawless or that we haven't got a grip is just wrong. We know that crime is still too high. We know we want to reduce it, but my point here is that not only are we seeing crime reducing compared to last year across a very broad range of indicators, we're also seeing our positive outcomes, as in those number of people we successfully bring to justice, increase significantly month on month, such that it's significantly better than where we once were. So I think that's a really important point, that we can talk about lots of statistics that will worry the public based on different sort of elements of time, and that is important too. But actually, in the here and now, we're doing better than we were last year.
Okay, I have to hand back to the Chair. That is positive, but what we're talking about is front counters and how Londoners are going to perceive that and how they're going to feel safe in their communities. So, but thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Assembly Member Best.
Thank you. How many visits were there to Chingford Police Station last year?
Stand by. Chingford in Waltham Forest, on average, 3.4 crimes were reported per day.
No, I asked you how many visits were there to Chingford Police Station last year?
By whom?
By the members of the public.
I don't have that information.
Oh, that's ridiculous. How can you be looking to close a front desk of a police station? You don't have the information on how many people visited it.
Because what we have information on is actually where there's been a record made for a policing purpose. So in this case, I'm using crime as the main sort of proxy for that.
And you're using crime, Assistant Commissioner, and let me just go back to that 2017 survey that found that crime was only 18% of the reasons that people visited the police station. You have other things, for example, crime updates, lost and found, reporting a missing person, getting an update on a missing person, mental health concerns, need for information, complaints. There is a long list of reasons that people visit a police station. And now you can't even tell me how many people visited Chingford Police Station last year, where there is an overwhelmingly elderly demographic compared to the rest of London, and you are asking those people to walk either 3 hours to the next police station or get on a public transport which will take them over an hour to get to the next police station front counter that's open, and you can't tell me how many visits there were.
No, we don't record by number how many people walked into the front counter.
But yet you want to ask what is an overwhelmingly elderly population compared to the rest of London to get on a bus for over an hour to go to the next police station or walk for over 3 hours. That is ridiculous, and you can't even tell me how many people visited it. But what we do know is taking that data of 50,000 people that reported a crime last year and looking at the 2017 data of reasons why people went to a police station, we can guess that there is probably over 250,000 people having recorded visits to a police station every year. And yet you can't tell us about those people. You've only chosen to focus on the crimes, but that's over 250,000 of, in some cases, very vulnerable individuals going into a police station every year. Now, I want to move on to the police funding settlement. You said that was the point, that you knew the new Met for London strategy of having an open front counter in every borough wouldn't work. Am I correct? You said that was the point at which you knew there was a gap.
So once we had the funding settlement, we then made a list of the tough choices. Obviously, we wanted and have achieved the overwhelming majority of the new Met for London.
And can you confirm to me when in the police funding settlement was the reason for the gap?
That's my understanding, yes.
OK. Can you confirm when that came?
So the funding settlement from government was just before Christmas.
Yeah.
And then we did...
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. And Deputy Mayor, can you confirm which political party was in government at that time?
I can confirm that the Labour government of last year gave a record number of funding to...
Sorry, you've just heard the Assistant Commissioner confirm that that was the point at which there was a funding gap in the Met for London, and that is the reason why we are closing police stations today. Now, the Mayor told us with a Labour government and the wind in his sails that things would be so much better for Londoners, but we have just had it identified by the Assistant Commissioner that the reason for this gap is because of the Labour government previous to Christmas and their police settlement. Now we have a gap of £7 million, which means that we are closing these police stations. The Conservative group were the only group on this assembly that put forward a budget amendment to put an extra £122 million into the Met. Why did you not accept that?
I think that the Assembly member knows that the budget gap wasn't caused overnight by one government's action, that the Met has been systematically underfunded for over a decade.
Well, funnily enough, when there was a Conservative government, we were happy to... The Met for London plan was made under a Conservative government and it was funded. You have just heard from the Assistant Commissioner, he is sitting next to you, that it occurred under a Labour government. When are you going to take some culpability for your mayor and your government?
Deputy Assembly Member Best, you know that the original funding settlement came into action in the autumn. You then know that through the work of the Mayor and myself to talk to ministers, we also then got an additional £32 million after that. So we have allocated that to the issues that matter to Londoners, and that is high volume crime and strengthening a neighbourhood office. We will continue to work with government to deliver on their ambitions around knife crime and VOG, and we will continue to make sure that we do all that we can to push the government. The Mayor has been unequivocal in his strength of feeling about funding for London policing.
Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Right, so I'm moving on to Assembly Member and Clark.
Yes, hello, good morning. To AC Twist, what alternative options were considered before you considered closing the front counters?
So there's a huge range, a long list of tough choices as to where we can take efficiencies. Looking across, at a macro level, sort of things like commercial arrangements we have with suppliers, looking at reducing waste, looking at reducing things like overtime. There's a whole long list of things. And this is one of the tough choices, because whilst members rightly note that this is sort of saving us £7 million, that's £7 million out of a required saving of £260 million. So things that you'll be familiar with, removing Royal Parks, front counters, reducing the size in our dogs unit, mounted branch, some reduction in, quite significant reduction in headquarters delivery. There's a huge list of things that we've had to reduce as part of this. But the things that are most important, neighbourhood policing, response, public protection, are the things that we've protected in order that we can deliver the best possible service for London. And I go back to the point that we have to, in a shrinking organisation, we're reducing by 1,700 people. We need to change the shape of that organisation so we can align it most to our priorities, which are neighbourhood policing and protecting the most vulnerable and getting a grip on crime. And the statistics that I've mentioned show that we're doing just that. But unfortunately, this does mean that tough choices are called tough choices because they're tough, and we knew that it wouldn't be popular. But we have to look at the reality of the situation, and in circumstances where front counters are not well utilised and the pattern of demand has changed over time, we needed to respond to that.
Okay, and we talked a bit about consultation earlier in this meeting. I'm just wondering how that consultation will take shape, because as others have pointed out, there's the way in which people communicate with police often depends on who they are, their background and their situation, and probably even where they live. So how is that consultation going to take shape, and also to what extent will the results of that consultation influence the final decision on this?
So I think I need to be clear, we're not doing a public consultation on this. That isn't something that, because we have to make the choices to save the money. And I think if we consult on, in an environment, do people want a front counter or not, most people will say yes, they do. But in the same way, if we ask them, do they want a neighbourhood team or not? Do they want a town centre team or not? Most people will say that they want those things. So the operational duty on us is to balance all of those needs and wants, and we want to do the best we can for the public of London. And we have to look at the reality of it and say that actually we have to invest less money in this so we can invest more money in that, whilst reducing the size of the organisation overall. So we will consult with local senior stakeholders as part of our equality impact assessment. We will consult with representative groups. We will consult, of course, with our trade unions, as we have a duty to do and we have committed to do, because this also affects people and residents who work for the Met. who are also residents of London, who are doing a good job now as public access officers, and I need to underline that. But we can't do a public consultation on something where most people will say they want it, but that stands in isolation, because the reality is we can't afford it.
I suppose on that, though, I mean, if I think of, like, you know, my council ward, for example, for the first time ever since I've lived in that whole area, we have 5 officers, you know, including a local inspector, and the relationship with the community is transformed. And having those number of officers, not just on the beat, but actually walking road to road with councillors and with members of the public. I think it's an interesting point to put to the public, actually, about, one is I think people do understand tough decisions, but I think it's also when we have people who, you know, I think if you were to ask people to kind of rank these decisions, I mean, I think active policing is ultimately what people want, but I think it's also true that having those locations to report crime, I mean, I think people do value both. I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Yeah, and I understand that. I just think the reality is, looking at the demand, and particularly overnight, particularly in sort of small hours of the morning when nobody goes in, I would rather have officers that can be out and about responding to people where they need them most, rather than sat in a building waiting for somebody to come in when there are other means of contact, when we've seen significant shifts in terms of how people contact the police, both in terms of online and using the phone. But also, and I'm really pleased to hear about the benefits that you've seen locally of having a strengthened neighbourhood team. That's exactly what we want to see, and we're definitely seeing that in areas where we have invested, where we've got good people, where the neighbourhood team is strong, and we're reducing abstractions, which is absolutely what we're trying to do. Then we're seeing really big shifts in our crime demand and our crime performance.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. There's an astonishing amount of hypocrisy around this table from our Labour members. Let's be clear, you voted for this. We've had it confirmed by the Deputy Commissioner here, Assistant Commissioner, excuse me, that it was as a consequence of the £260 million black hole that this Labour government has left the Metropolitan Police with. These tough choices have to be made. Also, as well, if you had accepted the Conservative Group budget amendment, you wouldn't have to have this conversation. We'd have an entirely different conversation. I, AC Twist, have some sympathy with the tough decisions you are going to have to make as a Met force going forward, service going forward. But what I want to ask you about is, you keep talking about crimes being reported to the police station. Of course, many other things happen at those front desks other than those crimes. So what mitigations have you got for things like violent and sexual offenders who have to come to the police station as part of their compliance? What are you going to do about things like that? What are you going to do about victims and witnesses who now may have to travel further? What are you going to do about people on licence? All of these other functions that the station performs, what mitigations do you have for them?
Yeah. Lord Bailey, thank you. So you're right, there are people that visit the police station, and one of the sort of mitigations, for example, I know one of the Assembly members mentioned sort of Edmonton. Edmonton is on the list to close, but to offset that, we'll open Wood Green, where there's a custody suite where more people need to visit for things like signing on for being on bail. So in terms of registered sex offenders, we will change the terms of where they need to register, because some of them do need to sign on, and part of that, and that's why we're keeping 20 front counters open across the Met. So those that are RSOs that have sign-on requirements, we will make sure that those terms are adjusted. For victims, again, the evidence suggests that people aren't reporting crime in the same way, but clearly officers going out seeing victims, the use of video statements, which has been hugely popular, is how we've changed significantly. And even a couple of years ago, that we didn't do any video sort of statements from victims. We didn't do any video appointments. And
I'll have some of that in writing, because I need to ask the Deputy Mayor a question. part of earlier on you made a comment you were happy that how this was leaked. I think you meant you were unhappy that how this was leaked. I think a direct consequence of this being dealt with so badly is because we no longer have the Met Commissioner in front of the Police and Crime Committee in City Hall. How has the Mayor's mates, also known as the Policing Board, how has the Policing Board responded to this absolute devastation of front counters across London?
So the London Policing Board, through the Finance and Performance Committee, obviously regularly talk to the Metropolitan Police about their budget and how, for example, the last committee we looked
I want
at
to be specific about how they responded to the fact that these front counters will be closed.
Lord Bailey, I think it's important to recognise that the last Finance Committee we in March looked at tough choices and how they were being designed up, and as has been previously mentioned, every iteration of those tough choices are coming forward in different ways. Has been discussed at the Police and Crime Committee. These are going through detailed design process. The equality impact assessments are being
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor, I have 20 questions. I think it's important that you recognise that the level of scrutiny provided by this plenary and the Police and Crime Committee is significantly above the London Board. Londoners will be upset that they haven't responded to this in the same level of vigour that people around this table have this morning. It is your job to make sure that they are focused on the things that Londoners are focused on, and I'd argue that this is a very big focus for Londoners. We would like to understand what their response has been to this particular issue, because it is a big issue in London.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bailey. I don't think you need to respond to that unless you...
Only to say that I really recognise the boards as directly elected representatives of their area, the importance actually of scrutiny and having the police here alongside us and being able to go through this today. I think that's recognised.
Okay. Assemblymember Small-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to AC Twist. Your own figures suggest that 5% of all crimes in London are reported via front counters. Are you concerned that closing these front counters could lead to underreporting of crimes in London?
Thank you. I don't think so, because I think people will find different ways and different routes as they have done to date. We're still maintaining 20 front counters that will be open, and we've seen the numbers for the front counters that are closing are very small over the span of a whole day. And also, as I mentioned previously, the shift in how people report is significant in terms of more people online, more people using 101, and also the benefit of having more officers out in communities on the street is seeing sort of people reporting that way. And one of the real sort of, benefits of our focus on things like retail crime has been seen that actually retailers are more willing to report crime. So one of the reasons that we're seeing increased reported retail crime going up is because some of the really big retailers have, instead of not reporting stuff that was below £200, are now reporting everything, so we can do something about it. And I'm seeing cases now where we're sort of building cases against individual prolific offenders for tens of crimes, which is actually leading to them getting a much more significant judicial outcome. So I am aware of it. I think of course there will be some impact, but I think it's more than offset by the change in reporting methods and by the benefits that will be brought by having more officers able to be about in communities and visible, so people can report crime direct.
Thank you. And in that answer, you mentioned the low number of crimes which are reported at the front counters that are closing. Will you be publicly releasing the number of crimes that are reported at those which are closing?
I've got no plans to at the moment, but certainly in terms of consultation with Assembly members, with local councillors, with local stakeholders, individual local leaders, superintendents, BCU commanders, more than happy to be transparent with you. I don't think it's something that we'll be publishing.
Okay, given that, could I ask how many are reported at Kensington, Hammersmith, Church Street and Royalty Studios?
So Kensington Royalty Studios, the average is 3.9 per day. Hammersmith, it's 4.1 per day.
And Church Street?
So I don't have that broken out separately.
Okay, if I could get that in writing, that would be
of course.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. What outreach will be made to residents who no longer have access to an accessible police counter?
So I think the message would be is there are still going to be 20 police counters that are accessible across the whole of London, and that the evidence would suggest that most people are choosing to access policing services by another way, and that by making this reduction, which is a tough choice, it's enabling us to continue to strengthen our neighbourhood offer, to increase the number of officers that are working in wards, to maintain our public protection uplift, which has been really significant and has delivered significant results in terms of our performance for victims, bringing more offenders to justice. So this is about really focusing in a smaller organisation on the core policing mission, which is around preventing crime, dealing with supporting victims and really bearing down on offenders.
And given that, do you think these changes will have a positive impact on issues you mentioned like shoplifting, phone theft, which are really concerning for people in my constituency?
So I don't think the changes are positive in that sense, but that would suggest that not doing this is sort of without implication, in that making this tough choice means that we can invest more in things like town centre teams. We're changing the shape of our organisation. We can't keep doing things the way we always have done as demand changes, but also as crime trends change. The thing that people are tell me they're most concerned about at the moment are theft, retail crime, antisocial behaviour in high streets. This is a tough choice, but making this choice means that out of the £260 million we have to save, we're not saving that by reducing neighbourhood crime, neighbourhood officers. We're not saving that by reducing response teams. We're not saving that by reducing public protection officers. That means that the savings have to fall elsewhere. And in this case, the saving part of that, a small part of that 260 million, is being saved by reducing the front counters.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. In the letter that you sent to London partners around this, it says 4 of the 5 reduced hour counters will close and the remaining counter resourced entirely by volunteers. Can you talk to us about what the volunteers means, who these people are, what their skills will be, what support they get? Yeah, just...
So I can talk about one location. So currently in Harrow, there's one location that's staffed entirely by police volunteers. Again, it's limited in its scope in terms of opening hours, and I don't think looking at a sort of volunteer model is a way of sort of changing the decision or reducing the number of closures.
Yeah, that's not my question. Yeah, I just wondered who they were. And just back to equalities, I think what I've heard is that when people have asked about the concerns about the people who currently report crime, your response has been that more people are reporting digitally. But obviously our concern is the people who aren't reporting digitally. So I think we really just want to hear some assurance. I'm running out of time, but just what communication you're going to do to the people who are currently using those sites that might not be able to travel, and the different ways that they can get the support that they need. And they're not the people that are going to ever use the digital routes and the video conferencing and all of that stuff.
No, thank you. I agree. And there will always be a means of contacting the police from that building, even if it's a sort of a phone that's there that people can contact the police and arrange for officers to attend, or actually phone the police and officers will attend and support them in making that report. But it is, when you look at the sort of data that we've seen, so 7.8% of the total contacts is by people over 65. So this isn't a huge demographic that sort of, it's not only older people that are coming into front counters. The data that we have wouldn't suggest that that's the case.
Okay.
So,
sorry, we just come to the end of that. I think if we need to follow up, we'll do that in writing. We've got Assembly Member Arani.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to clarify or ask for some clarification on some issues around budget. So, compared to previous years, are you getting more money from government or less?
So I don't have that to hand because it can mean different things in different ways. We've sort of, the total amount of money that we have is really significant. The budgets come in different forms, both from the central government grant, from our NIC funding, our National International Capital Cities grant, from the Mayor's office, and the amount of money we have is really significant. The gap in our budget is £260 million. That I can be definitive of today. If you need a breakdown of our overall budget, I'm very happy to provide it.
And in terms of that budget gap, so have you had budget gaps in previous years, and how has that been met?
So at different moments in time, the organisation has had to make significant savings. We are a pro rata and per capita, we are a significantly smaller organisation than we were in terms of money in 2012, and that sort of spans the whole sort of period of time. At different points, the organisation has become more efficient. We've reduced things. We've looked at our commercial suppliers. We've looked at how we do things to make it more efficient. But we're now and also, as Assembly members will know, over time we have had a structural deficit within the Met. And that structural deficit previously was met by things like selling off buildings to offset in-year deficits. But we ran out of road in the last sort of couple of years to do that now. And so anything we do in terms of capital, so our estate's challenges are well known in terms of not having large amounts of capital to invest in buildings, which means you accrue borrowing in order to sort of keep the lights on. There's an awful lot of complexity in the budget that comes from so many different ways. The challenge we have here and now is that in order to make a balanced budget for next year, we need to reduce our costs by 260 million, and that has driven further efficiency savings. That's driven the tough choices, and we're talking about one of those tough choices here today, which is 7 million of the 260 million overall that we need to save.
And Deputy Mayor, from the Mayor's perspective, same question about funding into police from the Mayor's perspective.
Thank you, Assembly Member Hirani. I think it's the AC Twist has outlined, the current position, but I think it's important that we recognise that this position has ramped up over the last 14 years since austerity was brought in by the coalition government and has slowly brought us to the crisis that we face today. I think it's also important to recognise that this isn't the first cuts to be made to police buildings or policing. Moreover, in London, 70 front counters have been closed already previously. So these are challenges that we are facing on top of an already eroded system. The Mayor and Commissioner have talked about building back the foundations, and they've moved a long way in that way. And the Mayor has, moved from giving 19% of the Met's budget up to 25% of the whole Met's budget. I think that's also important to recognise. But there is, only so far we can go.
Labour's now out of time. Thank you. OK, we've now reached the end of our question and answer session. Thank you to our guests for answering our questions today, and you're welcome to leave the chamber. And thank you again for attending at short notice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, just in terms of the Assembly, in terms of next steps, we're obviously political group leaders will have a further conversation about this and probably wider issues around Met finances, and no doubt it will come back at various ways through committees, plenaries and Mayor's question times. So can I now ask the Assembly to agree the motion set out on the agenda in my name, namely that the Assembly notes the answers to the questions asked. Thank you very much. The date of the next meeting of the London Assembly is scheduled to be a plenary meeting which will take place at 10 a.m. on Thursday the 4th of September 2025 in the chamber at City Hall. I now bring this meeting to an end. Thank you.